Did you know that in 2025, there are countries where Australians are not welcome? Imagine booking your dream vacation, only to be told that your nationality is restricted. It's a shocking reality that many Australians will face this year, and it's not because of their personal behavior, it's because of international politics, diplomatic tensions, and trade wars. You might think, how could this happen? Australia is a peaceful nation, but the truth is relationships between countries are always shifting. And right now, some nations are putting up walls when it comes to Australians. In fact, there are countries where tourists and even business professionals could be denied entry simply because of where they come from. But why? What's behind these growing restrictions? Is it politics, trade disagreements, or something else? And most importantly, which countries are involved? From the Middle East to Eastern Europe, these tensions are real and could impact your travel plans, your business dealings, or even your life abroad. Stick with us until the end of this video because we're diving into the top 10 countries where Australians are least welcome in 2025. And you might just be shocked by the list. Trust me, you won't believe where some of these countries rank. So keep watching to find out what's going on behind the scenes. Number 10. Russia. In 2025, Russia stands as one of the most significant countries where Australians are not welcome. The once friendly diplomatic ties between the two nations have deteriorated, especially following the ongoing geopolitical tensions surrounding Russia's actions in Ukraine. Australia has been a strong advocate for international sanctions against Russia, and that has created a rift between the two countries. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Australia has joined Western allies in imposing tough economic sanctions, and this has had a direct impact on how Russians view Australians. These sanctions have extended far beyond trade. They've even affected cultural exchanges and tourism. The Australian government has also made it clear that they support Ukraine's sovereignty, a position that hasn't sat well with Russia. In fact, Australia has been labeled by Russian state-controlled media as a staunch critic of the Russian government, adding fuel to the fire of diplomatic tension. As a result, Australians may find themselves facing visa restrictions, limited diplomatic access, and even unwelcoming attitudes if they attempt to visit Russia in 2025. For Australians looking to travel or do business there, expect delays, heightened scrutiny at the border, and a general sense of unease. In some cases, Australian citizens may even face outright bans, depending on the nature of the individual's relationship with the Russian government or the sensitive political issues involved. But Russia isn't just closing its doors to Australia because of politics. Russia's domestic laws are becoming increasingly strict, and they're applying those laws even more rigidly to foreign nationals from nations seen as hostile. While Russia has long been a fascinating destination for adventurers and history buffs, Australians now have to think twice before even planning their trip. Number 9. China. Next up on the list of countries where Australians are least welcome in 2025 is China, a nation with which Australia has had a complex and evolving relationship in recent years. For decades, Australia and China enjoyed robust trade relations, with China being one of Australia's largest trading partners. However, things took a dramatic turn around 2020, as political tensions, disputes over global governance, and international trade disputes began to mount. The relationship hit a boiling point when Australia called for an independent investigation into the origins of COVID-19, a move that didn't sit well with the Chinese government. In retaliation, China imposed a series of economic sanctions on Australian goods, including wine, coal, and barley. This strained trade relationship, combined with Australia's growing support for international alliances in the Indo-Pacific region, sparked deeper resentment in Beijing. But it's not just about trade. Australia's vocal stance on issues like human rights in Xinjiang and Hong Kong has made China more suspicious of its intentions. Chinese authorities have expressed concerns that Australia is aligning itself with Western powers against China's interests, leading to increased diplomatic hostility. For Australians traveling to China, this growing animosity manifests in various ways, including visa restrictions, heightened border control procedures, and scrutiny of Australian nationals, particularly those with business ties or a public stance on politically sensitive issues. With the Chinese government's increasing control over the narrative and its push for self-sufficiency in multiple sectors, Australians might find themselves struggling to gain access to China's market, or even facing travel bans if they're seen as critical of the regime. While it's not impossible to travel to China, Australians are facing an increasingly difficult and unwelcoming environment, making it a country to avoid for many in 2025. Number 8. Iran. Next on the list of countries where Australians are least welcome in 2025 is Iran, a nation that has long been a point of contention on the international stage. Over the years, diplomatic relations between Australia and Iran have been strained due to a mix of political differences, human rights concerns, and Australia's alignment with Western powers in the Middle East. As a result, Australians looking to travel to or do business in Iran in 2025 may face serious challenges. The Iranian government has been wary of Australia's support for international sanctions and its condemnation of Iran's human rights record, particularly in relation to its treatment of political dissidents, women's rights, and the ongoing crisis in Syria. This tension has led to a situation where Australians are now often viewed with suspicion, especially when it comes to issues of diplomacy or foreign aid. Australians may experience significant visa restrictions, with officials often scrutinizing applications more rigorously. Travel bans and entry difficulties have also been reported in recent years, particularly for individuals involved in activism or anyone with connections to organizations critical of the Iranian regime. Even tourists might face questioning or delays at border checkpoints, as Iranian authorities continue to monitor foreign nationals more closely, especially those from countries that criticize Iran's internal policies. Number 7. North Korea. One of the most isolated and restrictive countries in the world, North Korea is next on our list of nations where Australians are not particularly welcome in 2025. This highly secretive nation has long had a tense relationship with the West, and Australia, being an ally of the United States, finds itself on the wrong side of the North Korean regime. North Korea is infamous for its tight control over its borders and the limited access it grants to foreigners. Travel to North Korea is highly regulated, with strict rules and regulations governing who can enter, what they can do, and who they can interact with. For Australians, gaining access to the country is already difficult, and in 2025, the process is even more complicated due to heightened diplomatic tensions and the country's increasing isolationist stance. The relationship between Australia and North Korea has been particularly strained due to Australia's strong support for UN sanctions against North Korea, following its nuclear weapons tests and provocative missile launches. In response, North Korea has consistently placed Australia in the same category as other Western nations that it views as hostile. This means that Australians are often denied entry or subjected to intense scrutiny if they manage to get a visa. The government has little patience for countries it considers adversaries, and even those who do manage to enter are heavily monitored throughout their stay. Australians looking to visit North Korea for tourism or business can expect not only significant bureaucratic hurdles, but also the potential for outright denial due to the country's distrust of foreigners from nations it views as part of the Western alliance. In short, if you're hoping to check North Korea off your travel list, you'll need to think twice about making plans in 2025. Number 6. Turkey. Up next on the list of countries where Australians are least welcome in 2025 is Turkey, a country with which Australia shares a long, complex history, but one that is now facing increasing political friction. Historically, Turkey and Australia have had a significant relationship, especially given the Anzac connection from World War I, but more recent political developments have strained that bond, leaving Australians with a somewhat unwelcoming reception in 2025. One of the key reasons for this is Turkey's political shift in recent years under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. As Turkey has become more nationalistic and authoritarian, tensions have flared between Australia and Turkey on various issues. Ranging from foreign policy to national security, Australia's involvement in global military operations, especially in the Middle East, has caused friction with Turkey, a country that often views Australia's alliances with Western powers skeptically. A particularly sensitive issue between the two nations is the Gallipoli campaign, where Australians commemorate their ANZAC soldiers who fought in the battle. While the Anzac spirit is respected, political tensions over how certain historical events are remembered have occasionally caused disputes. Turkey has been critical of Australia's stance on certain historical narratives, and these differences have led to a growing sense of unease between the two nations. For Australians, this strained relationship can result in complicated travel arrangements to Turkey. While it's still possible to visit, tourists may face heightened scrutiny at border control, and Australians have reported being denied access or subjected to delays when trying to enter the country. Business dealings can also be difficult, as Turkey's increasingly nationalist policies may view Australian companies with suspicion, particularly in sensitive sectors. Number 5. Indonesia. Next on the list is Indonesia, a neighboring country that has long been a popular destination for Australian tourists, businesses, and students. However, in 2025, political tensions and a growing sense of nationalism in Indonesia may make Australians feel less than welcome. Despite the close geographical and historical ties between the two countries, there have been several issues that have impacted the relationship, particularly in recent years. One key factor is Australia's strong stance on human rights issues, including its position on West Papua, a region that has long been the center of controversy due to Indonesia's military control. Additionally, recent events like the banning of Australian tourists from certain regions and visa restrictions on Australians in specific industries have created further barriers. While Indonesia is still one of the most visited countries by Australians, the relationship has become somewhat strained politically, leading to travel warnings and complications for Australian citizens. In 2025, Australians hoping to visit or do business in Indonesia should be prepared for possible delays, heightened scrutiny at immigration checkpoints, and even denial of entry for certain individuals. Whether for leisure, work, or education, Australians may find that navigating the visa and entry requirements is more complicated than it used to be. We've put in a lot of effort to bring you this in-depth analysis, and we want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about these countries on the list? Have you experienced difficulties traveling as an Australian? Drop your comments below and share your experience. Let's start a conversation. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, and you'll get more insightful videos delivered right to your feed. Number 4. Saudi Arabia. Moving on to Saudi Arabia, a country that holds a prominent place on our list of nations, where Australians are least welcome in 2025. Despite Saudi Arabia being an important player in global politics in the Middle East, its relationship with Australia has become increasingly complex, especially due to cultural and political differences. One of the main reasons for this strained relationship is Australia's position on human rights. The Saudi government has faced significant international criticism over its treatment of women, political dissidents, and its involvement in the Yemen conflict. Australia has been vocal in supporting global efforts to address human rights violations, which has led to tensions with Saudi Arabia, particularly when it comes to Australia's alignment with Western powers in global diplomacy. Saudi Arabia is known for its strict laws and regulations, especially when it comes to issues of religion, gender, and personal freedoms. While Australia and Saudi Arabia have a growing economic relationship, particularly in the energy sector, Australians may still face significant challenges when visiting Saudi Arabia. This includes difficulties obtaining visas, especially for those who are perceived to have anti-Saudi views or are aligned with Western nations critical of the regime. While Saudi Arabia remains an economic powerhouse in the region, it's increasingly becoming a destination that Australians should approach with caution in 2025. Number 3. Venezuela. Next on our list is Venezuela, a country that has fallen into a state of political and economic turmoil in recent years, making it increasingly difficult for Australians to travel there in 2025. Once a thriving nation in South America, Venezuela is now grappling with a humanitarian crisis, hyperinflation, and an authoritarian regime that has created significant diplomatic friction with countries like Australia. The primary reason for the growing tensions between Australia and Venezuela lies in Australia's consistent stance on supporting human rights and democratic principles in the face of the Venezuelan government's increasingly authoritarian measures. Australia's vocal support for international sanctions against the Venezuelan regime, particularly under the leadership of Nicolás Maduro, has made Australians increasingly unwelcome in the country. In addition to political tensions, the ongoing economic instability in Venezuela has made it a challenging destination for any foreign nationals, including Australians. Basic goods are scarce, and the country has witnessed widespread protests against government policies. As Venezuela struggles with its internal issues, foreign nationals, especially from countries that openly criticize the regime, are often viewed with suspicion, further complicating travel for Australians. With the growing political hostility and increasing instability, Venezuela in 2025 is not a country many Australians will be able to visit with ease, making it a place to avoid unless absolutely necessary. For now, it remains a highly unwelcoming destination. Number 2. Syria. At number 2 on our list of countries where Australians are least welcome in 2025 is Syria, a nation that has been ravaged by years of brutal civil war and political unrest. Once a popular tourist destination for its rich history and ancient ruins, Syria is now one of the most dangerous and unwelcoming countries for Australians due to ongoing conflicts, sanctions, and the severe political climate. The situation in Syria is complex, with various international powers involved in the conflict. Australia has been active in supporting international sanctions against the Syrian government in response to its human rights violations, particularly in relation to the government's brutal crackdown on its own people during the civil war. Australia's alignment with Western coalitions opposing the Syrian regime has created significant diplomatic tension. As a result, Australians are increasingly seen as unwelcome and even hostile by the Syrian government. Australians looking to visit Syria in 2025 will find the country to be an extremely high-risk destination. The Australian government has consistently advised against non-essential travel to Syria due to the ongoing violence, unstable security situation, and the potential for being caught in the crossfire of the civil war. Even if one manages to obtain a visa, the risks involved in navigating a war-torn nation with limited access to resources makes it a dangerous endeavor. In short, Syria remains one of the most unwelcoming and dangerous destinations for Australians in 2025, and traveling there is strongly discouraged. Number 1. United States. Topping our list of countries where Australians are least welcome in 2025 is the United States, a nation that, despite its historical ties with Australia, is becoming increasingly difficult for Australians to navigate due to growing political tensions, trade disagreements, and stricter immigration policies. Although Australia and the US have long been allies, recent years have seen some friction between the two nations. Australia's position on key issues such as its stance on climate change, the Indo-Pacific security dynamics, and involvement in global coalitions has occasionally put it at odds with the United States. Tensions have worsened over diplomatic differences and Australia's support for certain international resolutions that the US opposes. In particular, trade disputes between Australia and the US have contributed to a decline in bilateral relations. On top of this, the immigration climate in the US has become more stringent, with a tougher visa process and heightened scrutiny for foreign nationals, including Australians. Some Australians report facing increased delays at border control and difficulty obtaining travel authorizations, particularly for business or academic purposes. In 2025, the U.S. may still be an important destination for trade, business, and tourism, but with increasing visa restrictions, political discord, and economic rivalry, Australians will need to reconsider their plans. Despite the strong ties between the two countries, the environment in the United States has become more unwelcoming for Australians in recent years, making it a top country to avoid for ease of travel and diplomatic ease. So there you have it, 10 countries where Australians are finding it harder and harder to gain entry or receive a warm welcome in 2025. These diplomatic tensions, visa restrictions, and political complexities make these nations increasingly difficult to navigate, especially for travelers or business people. It's a stark reminder of how fragile international relations can be and how much they can impact our daily lives, even when we least expect it. Creating videos like these takes a lot of effort, research, and attention to detail. It's not easy to bring you in-depth, unbiased, and informative content that covers such sensitive issues, but we're committed to delivering the most accurate and insightful information for you. If you found this video valuable, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to make these types of videos, which aren't always easy to create, and gives us the motivation to keep going. Subscribe now. It's just one click, but it makes a world of difference to us. We appreciate you being here and can't wait to bring you more eye-opening content. Thank you for your support.